This 4-year-old street kid crashes Millionaire's father's wake and says, "I own his inheritance." But when they find out who she really is, everyone is shocked. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The respectful silence of Edmund Sterling's wake was shattered by the sound of tiny bare feet running across the cold marble of the chapel. Valerie Sterling, 35, dressed in strict mourning, raised eyes red from crying, and saw a dirty little girl bursting in between the wreaths of white flowers. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her brown hair was tangled, her torn clothes hung on her thin little body, and her small feet left streaks of dirt on the immaculate floor. But it was her gaze that made Valerie freeze. Those dark eyes shone with a determination that didn't match her fragile appearance. "I've come to get what's mine," the girl declared in a clear voice that echoed through the silent chapel. The few family members and friends present turned, shocked. Murmurs of indignation began to spread among the mourners. Valerie felt her blood boil. How dare a street urchin interrupt the wake of her father, the respected businessman who had built a crystal empire in upstate New York? She stood up abruptly, her high heels echoing on the marble. "Get out of here immediately," Valerie said, her voice as cutting as the crystals her family produced. "This is not a place for you." The girl didn't move. Instead, she reached to her neck and pulled out something that gleamed under the candlelight. A golden locket with the Sterling family crest engraved in intricate detail. The same locket Valerie remembered seeing on her grandmother's neck in old photographs. The world seemed to stop. Oliver, 38, Valerie's husband, approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the family heirloom. How had that child gotten something that should have been locked in the vault of the mansion? "Where did you get that?" Valerie asked, her voice now trembling with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Mr. Sterling gave it to me," the girl replied simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He said one day I'd come to get it." Clementine, the 67-year-old housekeeper who had served the Sterling family for over 40 years, let out an audible gasp. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she watched the scene, and something in her expression suggested she knew more than she was letting on. The people present began to whisper louder. Saratoga Springs was a small town where everyone knew each other, and a scandal involving the most respected family in the region would spread like wildfire. Valerie felt the judging eyes burning her skin. "What's your name?" Oliver asked gently, kneeling to be at the girl's height. His kind nature always led him to try to diffuse tense situations. "Iris," she replied, and then did something that left everyone even more disturbed. She walked directly to Edmund's coffin and placed her small hand on the polished wood. "I miss you, Mr. Sterling. You promised you'd take care of me." Valerie felt her legs weaken. Those words echoed in her mind like an accusation. Her father, who had always been distant and cold with her, had promised to take care of a stranger. The pain of the loss mingled with a growing anger and something deeper. A childish envy she thought she had overcome long ago. "This is absurd," Valerie muttered, but her voice no longer sounded so convinced. There was something in the way Iris moved through the chapel, as if she knew every corner, every shadow. Clementine approached slowly, her eyes studying Iris with a disturbing intensity. "Child," she said in a hoarse voice, "how long have you known Mr. Sterling?" "Forever," Iris replied, her eyes never leaving Edmund's serene face in the coffin. "He used to come see me every week. He brought food and told me stories about crystals that shine like stars." The revelation hit Valerie like a punch to the stomach. Her father, who barely spoke to her beyond matters related to business, was secretly visiting a street child, telling her stories, the same tenderness she had begged for years and never received. "You're lying," Valerie accused, her voice breaking. "My father would never—" "He kept a picture of me in his wallet," Iris interrupted, pulling a small crumpled paper from her torn pocket. It was a Polaroid of Edmund smiling, a real smile that Valerie hadn't seen in years, while hugging Iris in front of the crystal factory. The silence that followed was deafening. Valerie took the photo with trembling hands, studying her father's face. There was a lightness in his eyes, a genuine happiness that she had never witnessed. It was as if she were looking at a stranger. Oliver gently touched his wife's shoulder, feeling the tension radiating from her body. He knew Valerie well enough to know that this revelation had shaken the foundations of everything she believed about her relationship with her father. "We're going home now," Oliver said firmly, looking at Iris. "You're coming with us. We need to talk." "Oliver, no!" Valerie protested. "We can't just—" "We can, and we will." He cut her off, surprising everyone with his unprecedented firmness. This child clearly knew Edmund somehow. We need to understand how and why. As they left the chapel, Valerie carried the weight of a discovery that would change everything. Her father, the man she had spent her whole life trying to impress and from whom she had never managed to get close, had dedicated time and care to an unknown child, and now that child was in her house, carrying secrets that Valerie feared discovering. The drive to the Sterling mansion was made in tense silence. Iris looked out the window with familiarity, as if she knew every street, every curve of the winding road that led to the top of the hill where the property was located. When the wrought iron gate opened, she showed no surprise or admiration. She just waved to the caretaker as if he were an old acquaintance. "How do you know where we live?" Valerie asked, her voice laden with suspicion. Iris simply smiled, a smile that carried too many secrets for a 6-year-old. Inside the Sterling mansion, Iris walked through the marble halls as if she were at home. Her small, dirty hands slid across the walls of fine wood as she observed every detail with knowing eyes. Valerie followed her at a cautious distance, disturbed by the child's familiarity with the environment. "Clementine always leaves gingerbread cookies in the kitchen on Tuesdays," Iris commented casually, making the housekeeper stop abruptly in the hallway. "And Mr. Sterling liked to drink chamomile tea before bed, but only when he was worried about something." Clementine exchanged a meaningful look with Oliver. How could a child who supposedly lived on the streets know such intimate details of the family routine? Valerie felt a chill run down her spine. There was something deeply disturbing in the accuracy of these observations. "How do you know this?" Valerie asked, trying to keep her voice controlled. Iris stopped in front of the grand piano that occupied a corner of the living room. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the bench and began to play a melancholy melody. Her small hands moved across the keys with impressive precision, performing a Chopin piece that Edmund used to play when he was alone. The sound echoed through the house like a ghost from the past. Valerie immediately recognized the music. It was the same music her father played on the rare nights she found him awake, lost in thought at the piano. But she had never heard anyone else perform it. "Where did you learn this?" Oliver whispered, genuinely impressed. "Mr. Sterling taught me," Iris replied, continuing to play without looking at the keys. "He said the music helps when the soul is heavy." Clementine let out a low moan and leaned against the wall. Her legs seemed unable to support her any longer. "My God," she murmured, "how is this possible?" Valerie felt the world spinning around her. Her father had taught this child piano. The same man who was always too busy to attend her school performances had dedicated time to teaching music to a street girl. "You're lying," Valerie accused, her voice breaking with emotion. "My father never taught piano to anyone. He barely had time for you," Iris completed, stopping playing and looking directly into Valerie's eyes. There was a disturbing wisdom in that childish gaze. "He told me about you. He said he wished he had been a better father." The words hit Valerie like knives. She stepped away from the piano, her hands trembling. How dare that child talk about feelings that not even she had managed to wrench from her father in life? Oliver realized that his wife was on the verge of collapse. He approached Iris, kneeling beside her again. "Iris, where did you live before? Who took care of you?" "In the streets near the factory," she replied simply. "Mrs. Rose and Mr. Miguel gave me food sometimes. They live under the old bridge. But Mr. Sterling said I didn't need to live there anymore." "When did he say that?" Clementine asked, her voice tense. "The last time we saw each other. 2 weeks ago. He seemed different, sadder. He said things were going to change and that I needed to be brave." Valerie felt her blood run cold. 2 weeks ago, her father had suffered the heart attack that took him. Had he sensed that something was going to happen? And why would a street child be his concern in the last days of his life? "He gave me this too," Iris said, pulling a carefully folded piece of paper from her pocket. "He said to give it only if something happened to him." With trembling hands, Valerie took the paper. It was a note written in her father's characteristic handwriting. "Valerie, if you are reading this, it's because I didn't have time to explain everything personally. Iris is not just any child. She needs special care, and I failed her as I failed you. Please don't make the same mistakes I did. Edmund." The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock in the hall. Valerie looked at Iris, then at the note, trying to process the implications of those words. Her father had admitted to failing her, but had also assumed responsibility for an unknown child. "What special care?" Oliver asked gently. Iris lowered her eyes, seeming for the first time truly childish and vulnerable. "Sometimes I remember things I shouldn't remember, and sometimes I forget important things, like where I put my food or if I've already taken a bath today." Clementine approached slowly, studying the girl's face. "Child, do you remember everything you see and hear?" Iris nodded shyly. "Mr. Sterling said my head works differently. That's why I could remember the stories he told and the songs he played." The revelation hit everyone like lightning. A child with a photographic memory had been watching the Sterling family, absorbing every detail, every intimate moment. This would explain how she knew so many family secrets. Valerie felt a mixture of fascination and terror. If Iris really had this ability, how many of her father's secrets did she carry? How many uncomfortable truths had she witnessed? "Do you remember conversations between my father and other people?" Valerie asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Iris hesitated, looking at Clementine as if asking permission. The housekeeper nodded slowly, seeming resigned to the inevitable. "He talked a lot on the phone about you," Iris said quietly. "He always asked someone how to make you smile again. He said you were always angry with him, but that he didn't know how to fix it." Tears began to stream down Valerie's face. For years, she had believed that her father simply didn't care about her feelings. To discover that he not only cared, but was actively seeking ways to connect with her was both comforting and devastating. "He also talked about the factory," Iris continued, seemingly oblivious to the emotional impact of her words. "About how he wanted to do something good for people like me. He said he had a lot of money, but that money is useless if it doesn't help those who need it." Oliver frowned. "What kind of help?" "He wanted to build a school, and a place where children like me could sleep without being cold. He showed me drawings in his office." Valerie was perplexed. Her father, known for his business coldness and relentless focus on profits, was planning social projects. Why had she never known about this? "Where was this office?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "On the 3rd floor of the factory. He took me there sometimes, when no one was around. There was a secret door behind the bookshelf." Clementine paled. The secret door was something that only she and Edmund knew, a small room where he kept important personal documents. How could Iris know of its existence? Night fell over Saratoga Springs, but inside the Sterling mansion, the revelations were just beginning. Each word from Iris opened new wounds in Valerie, while revealing an unknown side of her father. "I need to see that office," Valerie said suddenly, determination replacing the confusion in her voice. "Now?" Oliver asked, worried. "Now," she confirmed, looking at Iris. "And you're coming with us. I want you to show me exactly what my father showed you." As they prepared to leave, none of them imagined that the discoveries in the factory would shake even more deeply everything they thought they knew about Edmund Sterling. The Sterling Crystal Factory stood against the night sky, like a cathedral of glass and steel. Valerie drove in silence through the deserted streets of Saratoga Springs, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as she processed the revelations of the last hours. In the back seat, Iris watched the city lights, with eyes that seemed to carry memories too old for her age. "There," Iris pointed when they arrived at the factory gates. "Mr. Sterling always parked under that tree when he came to pick me up." Valerie felt another blow to her stomach. Her father picked up this child regularly. How often? And how had no one in the company commented on this? Oliver asked Valerie's keys to unlock the administrative building. The place was shrouded in heavy darkness, broken only by the security lights that cast distorted shadows through the corridors. The sound of their footsteps echoed disturbingly in the empty space. "This way," Iris whispered, walking confidently through the dark hallways. She led the group to the elevator, pressing the button for the third floor without hesitation. He always said the third floor was special because you could see the whole town from up there. When the doors opened, Valerie found herself in front of the office she had visited hundreds of times during her life. But now, seeing it through Iris's eyes, the place seemed different, laden with secrets she had never noticed. Iris walked directly to the bookshelf of corporate law books in the right corner of the room. Her small hands searched for something behind the thick volumes until they heard a soft click. A section of the bookshelf shifted, revealing a narrow passage. "My God," Oliver murmured. "How did you know about this?" "Mr. Sterling showed me," Iris replied simply, entering the passage. "He said everyone needs a secret place to keep their dreams." On the other side was a small room that Valerie had never seen. The walls were covered with architectural plans, drawings of buildings, detailed designs. In the center, a table with models of buildings that clearly did not yet exist. "A school," Valerie said, studying the projects with growing astonishment. "And this, it looks like a shelter for children. And here," Iris pointed to another model, "was going to be a free medical clinic. Mr. Sterling said that many people get sick because they don't have money for a doctor." Oliver picked up a folder labeled Project Hope. Inside were detailed budgets, construction schedules, lists of materials, all meticulously planned, as if Edmund were about to begin construction. "When was he going to start all this?" Valerie asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Next month," Iris replied. "He was very excited. He said he was finally going to do something that would make you proud of him." The words hit Valerie like a punch. Her father was planning all that to impress her, to show that he wasn't just the cold businessman she knew. "There's more," Iris said, opening a drawer. Inside were dozens of photographs, all of street children, needy families, abandoned elderly people. Each photo had a small note attached with information about each person's situation. "Did he know all these people?" Oliver asked, flipping through the images. "He visited one at a time every week. He brought food, medicine, sometimes money, but he always said not to tell anyone." Iris picked up one of the photos, showing an elderly woman. "This is Mrs. Eleanor. She has diabetes, but she doesn't have money for insulin. Mr. Sterling had been paying for her treatment for 2 years. Valerie sat heavily in the chair of the secret office. While she complained about her father's emotional distance, he was secretly taking care of dozens of needy people. Guilt began to mix with the confusion in her chest. "Why in secret?" she asked, more to herself than to Iris. "He said you'd think he was being silly, that important people couldn't waste time on poor people." Iris looked directly at Valerie. "But I thought you'd be happy to know." The implicit accusation in the child's words cut deep. Valerie recognized the painful truth. She probably would have discouraged such activities, considering them a waste of company resources. Oliver found another file, this one marked Iris, Special Situation. Inside were medical reports, psychological evaluations, treatment plans. The documentation revealed that Edmund not only helped the girl financially, he was providing specialized medical care for her neurological condition. Savant syndrome, Oliver read aloud. Extraordinary memory capacity associated with difficulties in emotional and social processing. The doctor said my head works like a camera, Iris explained. That's why I remember everything I see, but sometimes I don't understand why people get angry or sad. Valerie studied the medical documents. Her father had consulted specialists in 3 different states, seeking the best treatment for Iris. The level of dedication and care documented in the papers was impressive. There was a plan, she said, reading more files. He was going to officially adopt you. Iris nodded. He said I'd be like a daughter to him, but that you'd always be the most important, that maybe you two could be friends. The irony of the situation did not go unnoticed by Valerie. Her father, who had struggled to connect with his own daughter, had found in Iris an opportunity to exercise the fatherhood he had always wanted to give her. "There's something I haven't told you yet," Iris said hesitantly, nervously fiddling with the locket on her neck. "What is it?" Oliver asked gently. "Mr. Sterling wasn't my first dad." The silence that followed was heavy. Valerie and Oliver exchanged worried glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Oliver insisted. "I had a mom before. She worked here at the factory. Mr. Sterling knew her very well." Iris lowered her eyes. "But she got sick and left. Mr. Sterling said it was his fault." "What was your mother's name?" Valerie asked, her heart racing. "Rose Miller." Clementine, who had remained silent throughout the exploration, let out a recognizable sigh. "Rose Miller," she repeated slowly. "I remember her." "You knew her mother?" Valerie asked, turning to the housekeeper. "She worked here about 7 years ago. She was a very beautiful young woman, very dedicated. Your father fired her out of the blue. He never explained the reason, but he was very disturbed for weeks afterwards." Iris raised her eyes, fixing them on Clementine. "Mr. Sterling said he made a terrible mistake with my mum, that he didn't help her when she needed it most. That's why he helped me. He said it was the only way to fix what he had done wrong." The revelation added a new layer of complexity to the situation. Valerie began to realize that her father's relationship with Iris wasn't just charity, it was redemption. He was trying to correct a past mistake through caring for the daughter of the woman he had harmed. "Where is your mother now?" Oliver asked. "I don't know. She left home when I was 4 years old. She said she was going to work in the big city and would come back to get me." Iris's voice grew small. "But she never came back." Valerie felt her heart clench. The child had been abandoned not only by her mother, but also by the man who felt responsible for her. And when Edmund finally decided to take responsibility, fate intervened with his sudden death. "We're going to find out what happened to your mother," Valerie promised, surprising herself with the determination in her voice. "And we're going to finish what my father started." When they left the factory that night, everyone carried more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Iris was not just a street child who had crossed the path of the Sterling family. She was the key to understanding a completely unknown side of Edmund, and possibly the last chance for Valerie to truly connect with her father's memory. The following days turned into an obsessive search for answers. Valerie discreetly hired a private investigator, but it was Clementine who provided the first real clues about Rose Miller. The housekeeper revealed that she had kept the young woman's old address, something she did out of habit with all employees. "She lived in the Shady Creek neighborhood," Clementine said, handing a yellowed piece of paper to Valerie. "But that was 7 years ago. I don't know if we'll still find anyone who remembers her there." Valerie drove to the neighborhood with Iris in the passenger seat, watching how the girl reacted to the environment. Shady Creek was an area of simple houses, some well-maintained, others showing signs of neglect. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Sterling mansion. At the house where Rose had lived, they found Mrs. Davis, a 70-year-old woman who cared for a small garden in front of the property. Her eyes lit up when she saw Iris. "Good heavens!" she exclaimed, dropping the watering can. "Oh, you look just like Rose when she was little. You must be her little girl." Iris hid behind Valerie, intimidated by the woman's effusiveness. Mrs. Davis invited them in, serving strong coffee and homemade cookies while recounting what she remembered of Rose. Rose was a hard worker. She lost her parents early, raised herself. When she got pregnant, I thought her life was going to fall apart, but she fought like a lioness to take care of the child. Mrs. Davis looked fondly at Iris. "You two disappeared out of the blue. The house was closed for months." "Do you know where she went?" Valerie asked. "I heard she got a job at an important factory here in Saratoga Springs. She was all excited, said she was finally going to be able to give her little girl a better life." Mrs. Davis sighed. "But then she came back different, thin, sad, like she had taken a bad beating." Valerie felt a knot in her stomach. The timeline coincided with the period when Rose worked at the crystal factory. When she came back, she only stayed a few weeks. She seemed desperate, always talking on the phone, crying quietly when she thought no one was watching. The woman lowered her voice. "One night she appeared at my door with the little girl, asking me to take care of her for a few days. She said she was going to resolve a situation and would come back to get her." "And did she come back?" Iris asked, speaking for the first time since they arrived. Mrs. Davis shook her head sadly. "I never saw your mother again, honey. You stayed with me for 2 months until social workers came. I wanted to keep you, but I didn't have the official means to adopt you." Valerie realized that Iris was trembling. The girl vaguely remembered this period. The memories of a 4-year-old, even with her special condition, were fragmented and confused. "Where did they take Iris after that?" Valerie asked. "To a shelter in Albany, but I heard she ran away from there several times, always trying to get back to Saratoga Springs, as if she were looking for something or someone." The revelation hit Valerie like lightning. Iris wasn't wandering the streets by chance. She was looking for her mother, or perhaps for the man that Mother had mentioned. There was a logic to her presence near the crystal factory. On the way back, Iris finally spoke. "I remember Mrs. Davis's house. She made oatmeal every morning and let me help water the plants." "Why did you run away from the shelter?" Valerie asked gently. "Because my mum said she'd come back to get me here. She said there was a good man who was going to help us, who worked in a factory that made things that shined like stars." Iris looked out the window. "I knew that if I stayed near the factory, she'd find me." Valerie had to stop the car. The emotion was stifling her ability to drive. Iris had spent 2 years living on the streets, waiting for a mother who never returned and for the man that Mother had promised would help them. "Did Mr. Sterling know all this?" she asked. "He knew. When he found me, I was sleeping under the bridge near the factory. I was very thin and sick. He took me to the hospital, paid for all the medicine." Iris paused. "He cried when I told him about my mom. He said he had made a terrible mistake." That night, Valerie couldn't sleep. Each new piece of information about her father painted a portrait of a man tormented by guilt, desperately trying to redeem past mistakes. But what mistake had been so serious that it had haunted him for years? The answer came 3 days later, through the private investigator that Oliver had hired. The man appeared at the mansion with a somber expression and a folder full of documents. "I found Rose Miller," he said without preamble. "But the story isn't pretty." Valerie felt her blood run cold. "Where is she?" "In a psychiatric hospital in Poughkeepsie. She's been hospitalized for 5 years." The world seemed to stop around Valerie. Psychiatric hospital? Apparently she had a severe mental breakdown after losing custody of her daughter. The medical records indicate recurrent psychotic episodes, deep depression. She believes her daughter is dead. Iris, who was playing in the garden, did not hear the conversation. But Clementine, who was serving tea in the room, dropped the tray. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the house like an omen. "There's more," continued the investigator. "I gained access to the employee records of your factory. Rose Miller was fired for just cause, accused of theft." "Theft?" Oliver asked, incredulous. "Some valuable crystal pieces disappeared from the stockroom. Security cameras showed Rose near the location on the days prior to the disappearance. Your father confronted her. She vehemently denied it, but the evidence seemed convincing." Valerie felt her head spinning. "And then?" "Then she left Saratoga Springs. From the records I was able to obtain, she tried several jobs in nearby towns, but no one hired her when they found out about the dismissal for just cause. She ended up in a situation of extreme poverty." "That's when she left Iris with Mrs. Davis," Valerie murmured, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together painfully. "Exactly. It seems she returned to Saratoga Springs, trying to clear her name, but she couldn't. The pressure, the poverty, the separation from her daughter, all culminated in the mental breakdown." Clementine, who had recovered from the shock, approached slowly. "May I say something?" she asked in a trembling voice. Everyone turned to her. The housekeeper seemed to carry the weight of years of secrets. "I always thought that theft was strange," she said slowly. "Rose was an honest girl. And the pieces that disappeared, they reappeared in the stockroom 2 weeks after her dismissal." "How do you mean they reappeared?" Valerie asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. "Your father said he found the pieces in an area of the factory that hadn't been checked before. But I always found it suspicious. Why didn't they look there from the beginning?" The investigator frowned. "Are you suggesting that Rose was unfairly accused?" "I'm suggesting that my father found out too late," Valerie said, the terrible truth forming in her mind, "and that he spent the last years trying to atone for having destroyed the life of an innocent woman." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. If Valerie was right, her father had carried the guilt of having separated a mother from her daughter, of having destroyed the life of an honest woman with false accusations. "We need to visit Rose," Oliver said softly. "Iris has the right to reunite with her mother." "What if she doesn't recognize her own daughter?" Valerie asked, dreading the answer. "Then at least we will have tried to do what's right," he replied. "Something your father would have wanted us to do." As they planned the trip to Poughkeepsie, none of them imagined that the reunion between mother and daughter would reveal the most devastating truth of all. St. Vincent Psychiatric Hospital stood among the mountains of Poughkeepsie like a white fortress surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. Valerie firmly held Iris's hand as they walked through the silent corridors, their footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Dr. Howard Mitchell, the psychiatrist responsible for Rose, greeted them in his office with a cautious expression. He was a middle-aged man, grey-haired, and with gentle eyes that carried the weight of years of caring for fragmented minds. "Rose has been with us for 5 years," he explained, consulting the chart. "When she arrived, she was in a deep catatonic state. She didn't speak, didn't respond to stimuli. We believed she had completely lost contact with reality." "And now?" Oliver asked, watching how Iris paid attention to every word. "In the last 2 years, there has been a significant improvement. She talks, participates in therapeutic activities, demonstrates lucidity most of the time." The doctor paused, studying Iris with curiosity. "But there is a fixation. She firmly believes that her daughter died, and that it was her responsibility." Iris squeezed Valerie's hand tighter. "She won't remember me?" Dr. Mitchell bent down to be at the girl's height. "Your mother remembers you perfectly, honey. The problem is that her mind has created a protective barrier. It's easier for her to believe that you're gone than to face the pain of having been separated from you." Valerie felt a lump in her throat. Rose's suffering was a direct result of her father's actions. Every day that woman spent believing she had lost her daughter was another layer of guilt that Edmund had carried. "We want to try a meeting," Valerie said determinedly. "Rose has the right to know that Iris is alive and well." The doctor hesitated. I need to warn you that it could be traumatic for both of them. Rose has built a world where she can function believing that her daughter is at peace. Seeing Iris could destroy that balance. Or it could heal her, Oliver retorted. Yes, Dr. Mitchell agreed slowly. Or it could heal her. Rose was in the hospital garden, sitting alone on a bench under an apple tree. At 29, she looked older, her face marked by lines of suffering that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Her brown hair, identical to Iris's, was tied in a simple ponytail. When she saw them approaching, Rose raised her eyes. For a moment, her face lit up with recognition, but immediately closed in denial. "No," she murmured, shaking her head. "No, no, no. My girl isn't here. She's gone. She's at peace." Iris let go of Valerie's hand and walked slowly towards her mother. "Mommy," she said in a small voice. "It's me, Iris. I've been looking for you for a long time." Rose began to tremble. "You can't be her. My Iris is 4 years old. You're too big." Her voice was breaking. "My girl has those little curls that tickle my face when she sleeps with me." "I grew up, Mommy," Iris said, tears streaming down her face. "But I still remember the stories you told about the princess who lived in a crystal castle." Rose's body curved as if she had received a physical blow. That specific story was something that only she and Iris knew, a fantasy created on cold nights when they shared a small bed in the shady creek house. "How do you know that story?" Rose whispered. "Because I'm your daughter," Iris replied simply. "And I never stopped waiting for you to come back for me." Valerie watched the scene with a broken heart. The love between mother and daughter was palpable, but so was the pain of years of forced separation. She was beginning to understand the magnitude of the suffering that her father had caused. Dr. Mitchell approached cautiously. "Rose, are you okay?" She really grew up," Rose said, her voice full of astonishment. "My girl grew up without me." And then, like a dam breaking, she burst into tears. "Forgive me, my love. Forgive me for not having returned. Forgive me for having left you alone." Iris ran into her mother's arms, and both hugged as if the world were about to end. Valerie had to step away, her own tears blinding her. That reunion was simultaneously the most beautiful and the most painful spectacle she had ever witnessed. In the days that followed, the most devastating truths began to emerge. Rose, with her mind gradually reorganizing after the reunion with Iris, began to recall details she had suppressed for years. "I didn't steal those pieces," she said during a session with Dr. Mitchell, with Valerie present. "I was cleaning the warehouse when I found a box hidden behind others. Inside there were several crystal pieces wrapped up, as if someone was trying to hide them." Valerie felt her blood run cold. "What did you do with the box?" "I took it to the supervisor, thinking I had found something that someone had lost. The next day, the pieces were in the stockroom, as if they had always been there, and I was being accused of theft." The terrible truth formed in Valerie's mind. Her father hadn't simply made a mistake. Someone had deliberately framed Rose, and Edmund had believed the false evidence. "Who was the supervisor at that time?" she asked, although she already suspected the answer. "Mr. Charles Forrester. He was always very kind to me, so I didn't understand when he said I was a thief." Rose paused. "He seemed genuinely sad when your father fired me. Charles Forrester had been a factory supervisor for 15 years before retiring 2 years ago." Valerie remembered him as an efficient man, but there had always been something that bothered her about his presence, a subtle falseness that she had never been able to identify. "Rose," Valerie said gently, "do you remember any more details about that day? Anything that seemed strange?" "There were footprints in the dust of the warehouse, as if someone had been there before me. And when I showed the box to Mr. Forrester, he seemed nervous, hurried to take everything from my hands." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in Valerie's mind. Charles Forrester had orchestrated the entire scheme, hid the pieces, waited for Rose to find them, then framed her and returned them discreetly to the stockroom. But why? Oliver asked when Valerie shared her suspicions. Why would he do that to an innocent employee? The answer came from Clementine when they returned to Saratoga Springs. The housekeeper, after hearing about the revelations from the hospital, finally decided to tell everything she knew. Charles had been stealing pieces from the factory for years, she said, sitting in the mansion's kitchen. He sold them to private collectors. Edmund was starting to suspect, making more frequent inventories. Charles needed a scapegoat. And my father found out the truth, Valerie asked. 3 months before he died, he found hidden evidence in Charles's office after he retired. That's when Edmund started desperately looking for Rose and Iris. Clementine wiped her eyes. He was devastated. He spent weeks without sleep trying to find ways to fix the damage. Valerie sat heavily. Her father had discovered that he had destroyed the life of an innocent woman and spent his last months trying to remedy the mistake. The weight of guilt explained his obsessive search for social projects, his dedication to Iris, his desperation to redeem himself. He left instructions, Clementine continued, in case something happened to him before he could resolve everything. There are documents in the house safe that prove Rose's innocence and Charles's scheme. That night, while Iris slept in the mansion for the first time since reuniting with her mother, Valerie opened her father's safe. Inside, in addition to the documents that proved Rose's innocence, she found something that would change everything: a video recorded by Edmund 2 weeks before his death. In the video, her father appeared visibly emotional, sitting in his office. "Valerie," he said, looking directly at the camera, "if you are watching this, it is because I did not have time to fix the biggest mistake of my life." Valerie held her breath, knowing that she was about to hear words that her father had never been able to say personally. "I was a terrible father to you, and an even worse boss to Rose Miller. My coldness, my pride, my inability to show love, all of this destroyed 2 precious lives." His voice broke. "Iris is a special child, daughter of a woman I terribly wronged. Taking care of her is the only way I found to start paying for my mistakes." Valerie was crying now, seeing her father vulnerable for the first time in her life. "But my biggest regret is not having harmed Rose," Edmund continued in the video. "It's never having told you that you were always the light of my life, even when I was too blind to show it." The final revelation was coming, and Valerie felt that it would change everything she thought she knew about herself and her father. In the video, Edmund paused, running a hand over his tired face. When he looked back at the camera, there were tears in his eyes, something Valerie had never seen in life. "I need to tell you about my own childhood, Valerie, about why I became the cold man you knew." He took a deep breath. "My father was a severe man who believed that showing affection was a sign of weakness. When I cried, he locked me in the basement until I learned to be a man. Dee, when you were born, I promised myself that I would be different, but the only model of parenting I knew was his." Valerie sobbed, finally understanding the roots of her father's emotional distance. He had reproduced a cycle of coldness because he didn't know how to break it. "When I saw Iris for the first time, abandoned and scared under that bridge, I saw you at 6 years old. I saw the child I should have protected better, that I should have hugged more, to whom I should have said, 'I love you,' every day." His voice trembled. "Taking care of her was my way of trying to be the father you deserved to have." The revelation hit Valerie like lightning. Iris wasn't just a way of atoning for the mistakes with Rose. It was Edmund's opportunity to exercise the fatherhood he had never been able to give to his own daughter. "There's something else you need to know," Edmund continued in the video. "Something I discovered when I started investigating Iris's past to better understand her special condition." He held up a document. "I had DNA tests done to be sure about some medications she would need to take. The results showed something impossible." Valerie paused the video, her heart beating uncontrollably. A terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "Iris is not just Rose's daughter," Edmund said when she resumed playback. "The tests revealed that she is also my biological granddaughter." The world stopped for Valerie. She needed to sit down, her head spinning with the impossibility of that revelation. 22 years ago, when I was young and irresponsible, I had a brief relationship with a woman named Carmen Miller. She got pregnant, but disappeared before I knew it. Years later, I discovered that she had had a daughter, Rose. But when I tried to find them, I learned that Carmen had passed away and Rose had grown up in orphanages. Valerie's tears fell freely now. Rose was her half-sister. Iris was her niece. The child who had burst into the wake was not a stranger. She was family. When Rose appeared looking for a job at the factory 7 years ago, I didn't recognize her. She had grown up, changed. Only later, when I started investigating her origin to understand the connection with Iris, did I discover who she really was. Edmund covered his face with his hands. When I realized that I had fired my own daughter based on false evidence, that I had allowed her and my granddaughter to live in misery, I almost went crazy with guilt. Valerie understood now why her father had become so obsessed with finding and caring for Iris. It wasn't just redemption, it was grandfatherly love, even if late and complicated. Iris is your niece, Valerie, and more than that, she is the bridge that can connect us as a family, the way it should have always been. Edmund looked directly at the camera one last time. "If something happens to me before I can fix everything, promise me you will take care of them. Promise that you will be the sister that Rose deserves and the aunt that Iris needs. Promise that we will break the cycle of coldness that has destroyed our family for generations." The video ended, leaving Valerie alone with truths that completely changed her understanding of herself and her family. She was not an only child. She had a half-sister who had suffered terribly because of the mistakes of the father they shared. And Iris, the child who had invaded her life, was her niece. The next morning, Valerie woke up determined. She gathered Oliver, Clementine, and Iris in the living room of the mansion. The girl played on the carpet, oblivious to the revolutions that her presence had caused in everyone's life. "Iris," Valerie called gently, "I need to tell you something very important." The girl raised her attentive eyes, her exceptional memory capturing every nuance of Valerie's expression. "Remember when you said that Grandpa Edmund was like family to you?" Valerie knelt beside the girl. "Well, he really was your family. He was your real grandfather." Iris tilted her head, processing the information. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm your aunt, honey. Your mother Rose is my sister." For a moment, Iris just blinked, her extraordinary mind organizing the new information. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. "That means I have a real family now?" "Yes," Valerie said, hugging the girl. "A big, complicated, but real family." 2 weeks later, Rose was discharged from the hospital. Dr. Mitchell explained that the reunion with Iris and the discovery of the truth about her innocence had been powerful catalysts for her mental recovery. "She will still need psychological follow-up," he told Valerie, "but the woman who is leaving here today is very different from the one who arrived 5 years ago." Rose was nervous arriving at the Sterling mansion. She wore a simple dress that Valerie had bought for her and carried a small suitcase with her few belongings. "I don't know if I belong in this place," she said, looking at the opulence around her. "This place belongs to you as much as it does to me," Valerie replied firmly. "Edmund was our father. This house is our inheritance." In the months that followed, the dynamics of the Sterling family changed completely. Rose gradually regained her confidence and began working with Valerie in the management of the factory. Her experience as a factory worker gave a valuable perspective that complemented Valerie's administrative knowledge. Iris flourished, having both her mother and her aunt nearby. Her special condition was seen no longer as a limitation, but as a gift that allowed unique contributions to the family and the business. She memorizes every detail of the production processes, Rose explained to Oliver. She can detect inconsistencies that we wouldn't even notice. Valerie implemented the social projects that Edmund had planned. The school for needy children was built near the factory, along with a free medical clinic. But more importantly, she established a support program for families in vulnerable situations, ensuring that no child would go through what Iris had lived through. "It's strange," Oliver commented one night, watching Valerie play with Iris in the garden. "You've become more like your father than you imagined." "How so?" "The Edmund I knew in recent years was a man trying to redeem himself, use his privileged position to help others." "That's exactly what you're doing," Valerie smiled. "Maybe the ability to love was always in our family. We just needed to learn how to express it." A year after the wake that changed everything, the family gathered at the cemetery to visit Edmund's grave. Valerie carried a bouquet of white flowers, Rose held Iris's hand, and Oliver walked beside them. "Grandpa," Iris said, placing a small flower on the tombstone, "we did it. We are a real family now." Valerie knelt beside the grave. "Thank you," she whispered, "for teaching me that love sometimes comes disguised as pain, and that family isn't just blood. It's choice." As they left the cemetery, Rose took Valerie's hand. "You know what Dad would say if he could see us now?" "What?" "That all the pain was worth it, if it brought us here." Valerie squeezed her sister's hand, looking at Iris, who ran ahead of them, free and happy. The girl who had interrupted a wake proclaiming her rights had, unknowingly, saved an entire family. In the Sterling mansion, 3 generations of women learned together that true love is rarely perfect, but it is always worth fighting for. And that sometimes it is the smallest hands that carry the greatest gifts. The crystal factory continued to produce pieces that shone like stars, but now it also illuminated lives through education, health, and hope. The legacy of Edmund Sterling had finally found its purest form, a family united by the love he always wanted to give, but only learned to express through the courage of a 6-year-old girl who refused to give up on her dreams. And every night, before going to sleep, Iris played the piano for her mother and her aunt, the same melodies that her grandfather had taught her. Songs that healed souls and reminded everyone that even in the most wounded hearts, there is always room for a new beginning.